Hello and welcome back to Thanatology Themes. I'm your host, Carolyn, therapist and thanatologist. This is part two. We didn't know we were going to be doing two parts, but part two with Charlene Rhymsha.
You got that right.
Love her book. Look, my nails match your book. I had to
I
get
was just noticing, ooh la la, and your ring and everything.
love this book. We started the conversation in our last episode, and we're going to pick it up because love the book. And we'll just briefly say it's just, I had mentioned this before, but it's really well created. That's not the word. It's really lovely to read and inviting, great exercises. So I love to really show that piece of it.
Yes, thank you, thank you. Yeah, and I'll reiterate thank you to the Quarto Publishing Art Department for all of the editors there for all the ways that they made it a very pleasing and pleasant experience to hold the book and move through the book. And that was part of the intention when we created it, because right, it's like burnout is not a fun topic. It's not a fun at all, right? It's the opposite of fun place to be. And so we really wanted to create an experience that felt soft and warm and inviting for people that are suffering.
Yeah, and I should also reiterate the title, just say it, Burn Bright. Heal yourself from burnout and live with presence, purpose, and peace. And I had said last time, one of the themes, and you might have even said, burn bright, don't burn out, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So just bringing it back to that.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we're going to pick it up from where we left off.
Woohoo!
So this was the part, I love it. Again, another exercise. Create your own burnout metaphor and release strategy. Yeah, I just want to add, a lot of times with my clients, I use metaphor and analogy. Just want to put that out there. It is a therapeutic method. But yeah, if you want to go a little bit more into that.
Sure, sure. And I'm also happy to hear how you work with clients around it and recognizing the powerful aspects of metaphor and analogy. So I'll share, and then if you feel like sharing more on it as well, I love your input on that. And so yeah, basically, right, that analogy and metaphor is a way to allow our bodies to express what we might not have words for, and or we can, right, as we talked about in last episode, is that many of us, most of us human existence is pretty much neck up, and we're right, our intellect is considered like, where we gain our success and our status in the world and that type of a thing. So we can try to stay up here and think about and work through burnout, but we'll just kind of get stuck in different loops if we stay up here.
Yeah.
And so creating a metaphor allows us to drop more into our bodies and experience what burnout feels like for us. And so the exercise in there of creating your own burnout metaphor is the idea. I gave a couple of examples of like white knuckling it through life, or I had actually reached out to some folks in my community on social media, asking them, what does, if you were to put burnout into a metaphor, what does it feel like for you, right? And so yeah, one of them was, white knuckling it through life. Another one was feeling like always on eggshells with your own life's experience, right? It's like, even as I'm talking about this, and you kind of, right, Carolyn, you sort of leaned back, and that is like, we can understand each in our own way what that visceral experience is, right? It's one thing to say, I'm so stressed out, and then someone else can say, yeah, me too. But it's like, are we really getting at what the lived experience of it is, right? So like the white knuckling through life, or feeling like you're walking on eggshells of your own existence. It's like, oof, all right, that drops us into that deeper human experience without having to put a ton of, say, intellectual words to it. Yeah. And another one, I kind of forget the exact wording, but basically the idea of like driving 110 miles an hour, right, through a tunnel, not quite seeing the end of it, yet everything's spiraling around you at hyperspeed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I love it. I also, I mean, I agree with everything you're saying. And I also feel like metaphor, it gives people, we work with everybody individually. So it has them really identify their experience, which I
Mhm.
also just think metaphor, can be particular. I mean, I got it when you said eggshells, but for some people that really resonates for certain. So I think there's also that, people helping them, it resonates for them. Right.
Yes. Yep. Absolutely. Exactly. Right. Like the metaphor that I said about the car driving down there. You did not have that. Whoa. Because right. That one for you did not personally resonate. And so the idea is for people to get in touch with their own burnout, right? If whether one of the metaphors that I suggest works with them, right? Such as the eggshells, walking on eggshells, or if the idea is to sit down, acknowledge like, what does it feel like in my body to experience burnout? And if I were to create a metaphor for it, what would it be? Right. So it's giving voice to that experience, the lived experience of burnout, getting in touch with what it feels like in your body to be experiencing that burnout. And then the next piece of the exercise is to create a new extension of the metaphor to say undo and release that piece of it. So if we go with the white knuckling it through life, and I mean, I'm not a motorcyclist, but I somehow picture being on a motorcycle and like white knuckling, like, and then the idea of like feeling that tension of it and then very consciously and just practicing, because that's all a practice. It doesn't mean instantly you got it. Is the what would it mean to release the gas and maybe not be gripping so hard, releasing that white knuckle, and then maybe even pulling over into a turnout on the road that happens to look out at the ocean. I'm suddenly picturing like Big Sur or something like that. I think from our off-air conversation about your trip, out to the coast of California, right? And just noticing, okay, from white knuckle to releasing, right? That need to accelerate, to even taking a little break off to the side of the road, maybe even turning off the engine momentarily. And then sitting on a bench that happens to be looking over the ocean.
Yeah. No, I love that. I love that. And I think what also came up for me, sometimes people will say, can you sit with your anxiety or befriend your stress? And I feel like this is also, we're going into it and acknowledging it and really working with it. Right. And I think metaphor helps people, I mean, all of us, even me, get inside that. I love that though. That's a great, and I love those kind of visualizations. I think those are really helpful for people.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. Right. So it's like they can do it on their own, perhaps, once they've come up with one, even do like a recording of the meditation for themselves where they can be their own guide and visual. And then also like with clients that I work with, and I know some therapists, I know such as yourself, perhaps, right, that are able to use these type of tools in the book to help their clients. And then as they identify their metaphor, their burnout metaphor, that you can also, right, as the guide, lead them into a meditation around it as well. So it's nice to have that support if possible, right? So like the book is wonderful and it can be standalone, and if that's what they have and that's what they choose, great. But then especially with burnout, I'm going to say especially with burnout, but with burnout, with anxiety, depression, all of it, right? Having the support of another person to help guide can be really helpful. So this can be a standalone or a tool that is used in the therapeutic process.
Mhm. I'm a big fan of tools. I know, I love it. I love that. So this was the next quote. It's only one page late. I know I'm so slow going. I'm like, I loved every page.
Well, I love it. I know we could have like many, many episodes, but we'll probably stop at 2.
Well, I thought this was important. So so much stress comes from not having all the answers, not being able to control what's going to happen. Control, there's that word. Important to talk about, right?
So important, so important. It's, it's true of burnout, it's true of anxiety, it's true of, right, that many of the stress aspects of living as a human, right? And especially from the neck up, we want to be able to predict, we want to be able to tie things up in a bow. And it really comes down to that sense of safety in the world, right? Of like, I will be okay. But as you know, and I know, and some of your listeners can probably relate to this, is that the more that we vie for control, right? And I'm kind of doing the white knuckling thing again. We're gripping and in some ways trying to make our lives as safe and small as possible, that ultimately it's not helpful, right? It decreases possibility, and there's no way to control. We could make our lives as small and calculated as possible. I think that, the pandemic was a big wake-up call for a lot of people, because it's like, oh wow, no matter what, I couldn't have controlled for that. I couldn't have predicted that. So yes, a lot of it is learning how to sit with the discomfort of the unknown that is the next moment, the next day, the next year, while also building trust in yourself that no matter what, you are safe and well taken care of. And when challenging things occur, that you'll be equipped and available for it, but that your life trajectory is moving in a direction that is beautiful, that you do want, and that, I'll bring the universe in, that the universe is there to support you in.
Yeah. No, really important stuff. And, I work with all my clients. This comes in, I mean, with me too, this is just something I think as humans, and it can be in different parts of our life. Some people can be really good at work. I can go with the flow, but then it's in my personal life,
Absolutely.
Yeah, different things for different people. Okay. So page 65, I wrote a heart. Cellular memory question. Let's see what I put a heart on. Cellular memory. And then I wrote questioning old beliefs. Your entire body, all the way down to the cellular level, is listening to your mind's instructions. It got a heart. It got 2 hearts.
Nice. Beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah, it really speaks on the piece that our mind and body are not separate, right?
Yeah.
That it's an interconnected system. And we could also call it mind, body, spirit for those that do believe that they are infinite soul beings that happen to be living in these bodies and having a human experience, right? So recognizing that we are not, again, we're not separate. It's not about mind and body being separate and then we're trying to connect them. It's more about acknowledging that they're communicating with each other on unconscious, subconscious, amazing, magical levels all the time. And that the more conscious we become aware of that, the more that we can nourish our mind body system by really acknowledging, oh yeah, they are allies. Oh, my thoughts are powerful. They are affecting, they are being listened to by my cells, by my heart, by my blood, by my tissues, all of those ways. So learning like, wow, this is powerful, right? It can sometimes maybe feel, if we look at it from one side, like, whoa, this is scary that my thoughts have that much, right, power. But actually, when we look at it from that empowerment place, oh, wow, my thoughts and beliefs and how I talk to myself and how I, relate to the world, all of that really matters deep down on a holistic wellness space of being.
Yes, I totally, I also, one of the things, I worked in hospice for a long time, and I do say, I mean, I didn't come up with this, but it's a lot of people we do seem to be spiritual beings in a human body, you know, and at end of life, you really are working, you know, but it was interesting. I was actually working with a client just the other day, and halfway through the session, I said, I just want you to be aware that 3 times you said the word stupid about your own behavior. Are you aware of that? You know, you said, you know, can we, you know, and I like to bring in self-compassion, the little, you know, of course.
1000%.
Yeah. Yeah. But I just wanted to add that piece in of like, you know, how we, you know, because like you said, when we, bringing in the compassion, then you can make, I'm not saying you don't want to make a change about your behavior. This
Yep.
person thought they didn't make the right choice in the moment. Okay, that's fine. But it can come from a place of kindness, or you might agree, grounding, right?
All of that. Yep, absolutely. Right. There can be this belief. Actually, I was working with a client just yesterday around the inner critic. And there
Yes.
can be this, right? There can be this belief that I need to be mean to myself, right? That like being punitive or the breakdown to build myself up to get the motivation to change, that I need to really be mean to myself, right? And what's interesting is, right, we know as therapists and as humans, we also know as humans that it's not always the easiest thing to do, is that willingness to trust that when we're actually kind to ourselves and we can find motivations from that place of self-love and I'm enough now, that we actually have the ability to make bigger and more lasting, sustainable change than if we were continuously working from that place of, I'm no good, that was dumb, I need to do it differently next time, right? And how that contracts the energy. And then it might get someone to make some changes, but one, oftentimes there's a regression that can happen in the change. And also, even if, say, you do really make it and you become, you know, I'll just use an example, the CEO of a Fortune 500 company because you've beat yourself up the whole way, then what is your lived experience? You might have a lot of money, you might have a lot of, you know, social status and power, but how do you feel inside? What is it like? What is your truly lived experience when you get quiet with yourself? Do you like who you are? Do you like life?
Mhm. Totally agree. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, and we'll talk another time. No, the inner critic is a big one. And in the tools they call part X, it's the same thing. But I have said to people like, you know, you're a really nice person. You would never speak to other people the way your voice speaks to you. And they would be like, oh no, I would. So why do
Yeah.
you let the voice talk to you that way? You probably also wouldn't let someone else speak to you that way. Anyway,
Mm-hmm.
so that's
Mm-hmm.
a, you know, right. Being kind.
Yeah.
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 It's an ongoing process for most of us humans, and right, and such a valuable practice to continue with, right? I like to, when people are feeling, you know, great and lowered stress and really can identify and be like, I'm doing a great job, right? Kind of like we talked a bit about this, the celebrating the small wins type of a thing, is practicing and reinforcing that loving kindness presence with yourself. And then it primes things up a little bit more, that when you're in those more doldrum places where it feels like, oh, I'm no good, being able to go, oh, can I practice? Can I just, even if it doesn't feel fully available, can I practice giving myself some self-love and self-compassion, right? And can I practice giving myself self-love and self-compassion for that pained part inside of me, right? That part of me that is saying, you're so dumb, right? So it's not about necessarily saying, well, you're smart, you're not dumb,
Right.
right? But
Right.
really going like, oof, I hear you, I feel your pain, and I'm having compassion for that part of me.
Absolutely. I mean, I was I'm level 1 trained in IFS. And so the parts work, and I've done some and it's very similar. Yes, absolutely what you're
Mm,
saying for that part or that shadow. Definitely. Yeah.
mm, mm.
Okay, more hearts. We're gonna move on to more hearts. Um,
Yay.
I want to show this this pretty,
Oh,
I mean, here, where are the hearts? Oh, the hearts are over here, but I did want to just show how pretty the book is. So And maybe this is where the book takes a little shift. I don't know, page, in mind focus. This is mind
Mhm.
focus. Well, maybe it doesn't. I don't know, but for some reason I loved this. We
Ah,
identify with what we're thinking so closely that what we think seems to be who we are, right? Our thoughts seem solid, tangible, and therefore true. Thoughts are powerful because we attach them to our belief system.
yeah. Yeah.
Important. Yeah.
So important to recognize. It reminds me of a couple of things. One is when I started working with a client a couple years ago who she experienced severe anxiety when she was younger and was able to move, and panic attacks, and was able to move through a lot of that stuff through coping strategies, through different ways of, right, really like behavioral changes and that type of thing. So tremendous work that she did. And then she came to me maybe a decade later because she was ready for, kind of to just do some, I'll say, fine tuning her mental health, or ready to expand in a different way, right? Like she had moved out of survival mode and was more like, I'm ready to really expand and grow into more of who I am. And some of our early work, I loved how she stated this. She goes, wow, I just realized that my thoughts are not facts.
Yeah. Yes. Wow.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
And I think like allowing that to settle in for each of our listeners and for ourselves, because we can get caught in this trap of my thoughts are truth.
Mhm.
There's no other way to look at it. It just is, especially when we get poked in those really painful places, the stories about ourselves and about our worthiness, and see, I'm no good, and there's definitely something wrong with me, right? When it loops into the body and the emotions, and it just feels so true, right? That it's like, well, of course this thought is a fact.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So remembering thoughts are not facts. They are simply thoughts that, yes, over time, when we think about them over and over again, they become part of our belief system.
Absolutely. And that's a big one. And there's so many different ways. And I do talk to clients about that. And then sometimes we'll take a little bit of the Buddhist approach to, can you let your thoughts kind of come and go a little?
Mhm.
There's the mountain meditation, which is, I'm a mountain and a plane zooms by. That could be one thought. Rain comes, the different form. All right, I'm just letting the thoughts, I don't know, kind of come and go.
Love it.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And that's, I love that. That's an aspect of that. Those are metaphors as well,
Yeah.
right? Or analogies, like that. They're mini metaphors that we're able to create an abstractness to it, right? So there's like the thoughts, and actually, okay, so this is the next piece, right? Our thoughts can seem so concrete, and that's what I was saying in the book, right? That it's
Yes.
like somehow thoughts seem more concrete than this like visual experience of, say, like the imagination, having a plane going by or the rain coming down. But all of it is our imagination, right? None of it is more concrete than the other. I'm also recall a client that I had a while back, and I was really working with her to drop into her body. And there was this way that it was very scary for her to drop into her body. And she felt very safe in her thoughts. Even though her thoughts were certainly part of what was keeping her not being able to drop into her body, right? That the fear was showing up, but that there was something very seemingly concrete and true and real and grounding about the thoughts.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for me as a therapist, that was because I'm sure you do it. Like we learn from our clients all the time from their lived experiences. And so I was able to, in a way, drop even deeper into that acknowledgement about how thoughts can feel like the safe place to live, that thoughts can feel like our identity, that thoughts can feel like there are anchor points for control and safety.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really good point. That's a really, really good point. Um, no, thank you. I think that that's really an extra piece of it that I hadn't really thought about. That's true,
Mhm.
right? For some people, they think it's a safe space, but when you really look at it, you know, it's not. Yeah. Yeah. So this just goes along with kind of what we were saying. Awareness of your thoughts is absolutely necessary for change. The thoughts you think over and over become your belief system. And I wrote next to it, sometimes we get very constricted,
Oh
right?
yeah. Oh yeah. Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. Yep.
I think that I had heard a long time ago, a belief is just a thought you think over and over and over, right?
Isn't that amazing, right? And it started somewhere and it had a purpose at the time,
Mhm.
right? That every thought that we think and every behavior that we have and every emotion that all of it, it serves a purpose in some way. So when I'm working with, when I'm working with clients and they're having these certain thoughts or right, or kind of like behaviors, then I remind them that there's a purpose, right? Even if at this point it's realized as, I'll use the word maladaptive, that at some point it served a purpose of protection when you were younger, right? So then asking them, so what does this behavior protect you from? Or what do you feel like the purpose is for having this thought pattern and belief?
Mhm.
And so it's kind of a way to kind of work it in a different way that also can help to infuse self-compassion and self-kindness in there as well, going, oh, I'm having these self-defeating thoughts because at one point when I was younger, it was helpful for me to do because it dimmed my light and it was dangerous to be in my family or it was dangerous to be in my school as the smartest, the brightest one. So I just learned to tell myself that I was dumb, right? So I feel like I'm talking on numerous aspects of it, but that recognizing that yes, our thoughts that turn into beliefs started somewhere and that they started not for no particular reason, but that they had a safety protective purpose at some point, which also again can help us to rewrite our story and thoughts and belief system in the present from that compassionate, self-kind place.
Yeah. 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 No, agreed. I love that. I think that's all, really helpful to work with those thoughts. Um, this also resonated with me. It's not just about scarcity of money. This is the next page. This is going back to burnout.
Mhm.
I guess I'm shifting here a little bit.
Yeah.
Not just about scarcity of money, it's the underlying sense that there's never enough time, energy, resources, or information. I don't have enough. And I might get in trouble for saying this. I wrote Gen Z next to that. I
Mhm.
don't know if people are going to get upset or not. My son is a Gen Z, but it feels like it's just a different time. And I don't know if social media has anything to do with this. Who knows? But the scarcity feeling, right? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yes, I gather absolutely that the social media era, and I mean, of course, we're going to continue to be in the era, plays a big piece of it, and actually, like of what's going on for even people of all ages, because we're all at this point susceptible, but especially folks that had right in their developing brain years of adolescence and the desire to belong and that need to be accepted, right? All those very human needs, is that there's an area in the book, I call it digital TMI, right? Digital too much information, which
Yeah.
basically, right? It's like we are constantly getting bombarded with how to live, how to look good, how to. And so there can be a lot of pressure, well, yes, a lot of pressure, but also that there's not the acknowledgement necessarily of actually, if I get quiet and look within, then my answers are actually there. Like, what does it mean to live a life full of fulfillment for me? What does success look like to me? What does a self-care routine that nurtures my skin as well as my body, right? Like the ability to tune inward can easily enough get drowned out
Mhm.
by all of the information outside, right? So we're not necessarily taught to look inward, and we're also receiving all this information outward and all this continued new content coming out every 5 seconds, right? So it's like, of course, you're going to not of course, but you're more likely to feel behind the 8 ball, so to speak, and trying to play catch up when it's like, I need, okay, oh, I need more. Oh, I need to do this. Oh, I don't have enough. Okay. Oh, well, these are some ways that I can get it, that I can get it, that I can get it. And with that dysregulated nervous system, as we're pulling for it, and with that dysregulated nervous system that really is burnout, I'm kind of forgetting if we spoke about this piece, but that the nervous system's response of feeling always on and always needing more is the autonomic nervous system, the fight, flight, freeze response, the sympathetic nervous system part of it that is literally stuck in on mode. So if it feels like you're always on, you are literally always on because your nervous system, right, in that hijacked way is always on. And so it's like that striving for salvation in a way, right? That may not be the exact wording, but striving to really just feel calm and fulfilled. And so when we're in that space, I feel like any human can, whether you're experiencing burnout or not, can relate to phases and moments in your life where it's like, oh, I don't have enough time. I really want to do that, but I can't sit down for 5 seconds of that. I don't have time. And the reality of recognizing it's not actually about not having enough time. It's not about having enough money. It's not about having enough resources. It's actually about being able to calm your nervous system down enough to trust that you are enough now, that you have enough now. And actually it comes back to that place again of that place of, instead of beating myself up, of being able to say, okay, I have enough now, right? And there's more that I want, and I'm going to strive for more. But yeah, that grasping, does create that sense of scarcity, right? Scarcity of time, scarcity of resources that can get perpetuated in our society, within our families, within our belief systems, and certainly within our nervous system's response to life.
Okay, we hadn't really talked about that, but I hadn't, you're right. I mean, and I hadn't really quite thought of it that way, but I hear what you're saying. Maybe what you're even kind of saying is like, this is the new, I mean, it's a stress tiger, but it's the new saber-toothed tiger. I mean, for our generation, and really, I mean, us also, but even younger people, that this is the saber-toothed tiger. Like, oh my gosh, my friends have this, or they had that vacation, or they, whatever. And there's that saber-toothed tiger, right?
Yes, absolutely. And as you were saying, that reminds me, right? The older saying I would hear my parents say it of, keeping up with the Joneses.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's like, there's always been, I mean, at least in modern society, that idea of status and saving face and looking good to your neighbors. And right, like certain family cultures are like, we keep it in the family. We don't, right. We all got to look good and polished all the time. And so, right, it's like, there's been a version of that, but then, right, with social media, it's heightened to the nth degree.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think you get it now constantly if you're looking, whereas it might before be like your mom said something, or your sister, your but now it's like, it's really probably even, or, I don't know, maybe if you walked outside and you saw the Joneses, okay, they have a bigger house, but now it's just like, you kind of can't escape it. It's right on your phone. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's a new click. Okay. You taught me something new. I love this. And we did talk about that, right? Okay. And you wrote, maybe you just said this, the power to change your outcome begins in this present moment. You get to choose a new belief system and new thoughts that support I am enough. Maybe you just said that.
I mean, I said maybe a version of that, but yeah, absolutely, of recognizing that, like, the power is truly now, right? Like Eckhart Tolle, the power of now, and right, and other belief, other structures and belief systems around that, of recognizing is like, we can't change the past, we can learn from it, and we can also choose the next thought that we have, right? And so, yes, there's some of it around like mantras and affirmations, and those are great, but also acknowledging that we need to start to embody them as as well that we get to choose, right? Let's see. Yeah, we could say like, let me lean into, what does it feel like to be enough? What if I am enough now? Right. And actually, I like to put, I'm kind of veering off, but not too much, I don't think. I like to put kind of like a couple of words in in front of a sentence, instead of it just being like, I'm enough, I'm enough, I'm enough. That can still be kind of neck up, especially if like you don't believe it. And so I like putting like a preface to it of, what if I'm enough already? Right? It softens the edge of it. It creates that inquiry, right? And so it doesn't allow it opens up the possibility for change, instead of it being kind of like, because we can have that resistance to change. So it's like different parts of our being are like, I'm not enough, but I'm not enough. Are you not listening to me? I'm not enough. Right. So we can say over and over and over again, 2,000 times a day, I'm enough. But if we're not dropping into the body, as well as like we talked about with IFS parts work, allowing the parts of us that don't feel like enough to be able to voice, their space, it can be futile to have just positive affirmations all the time, right? But that piece, and I gathered like your body shifted when I said, what if, right? What if I'm enough right now, right? That there's a softness to it that our mind, body, spirit, right? That our parts can begin to lean into.
Yeah. No, I love that. I think that's really true. I mean, I know it's true, not only from my own experience, but from working with clients too, right? This is, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're making a little more space for all the parts to be like, okay, maybe we can open to this, right? Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
No, I think that's great. The next part is kind of, well, it is a little bit with the mind traps, right? You talk about, you have an exercise of unhelpful thoughts versus helpful thoughts. And then you mentioned the types of mind traps. I just thought that was a really, a kind of important thing that just could be helpful for people.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So I like to use the terms helpful and unhelpful more so than healthy, say, versus unhealthy thoughts, or positive thoughts versus negative thoughts,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I think I pulled this, if I'm not mistaken, mostly from acceptance and commitment therapy from ACT. I believe that, if I'm not mistaken, that they use the helpful and unhelpful thoughts, and I really resonated with that, because again, right, it's not like, it can get convoluted of what's a healthy thought, what's an unhealthy thought, what's a good thought, what's a bad thought.
I
Right.
don't use those words ever. And
Right.
I'm going to jump in,
Yes, please.
a big piece of my training was, when I did home hospice, we were in people's homes. I worked with a very diverse population. And I mean, one, it just, I would say adaptive, maladaptive, I think is similar to helpful, unhelpful, but positive and negative has so much judgment. And it also,
Yes.
it can also be offensive to certain people's cultures, or it's just not. So I agree with you. I also try to stay away from role modeling that thinking for clients, because anytime people like, if something's positive, then what's the negative, like I try to do them more. So I agree with you. I like helpful, unhelpful, positive coping, that in that, that, or what's coping, what's not, I'm with you 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. Right. And with that helpful and unhelpful, it's kind of like is this a helpful thought that leads me in the direction of how I want to live my life?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love I love that. So I love how you have like a little chart here, which I thought was really helpful. And then the mind traps, I just thought, oh, and then can I just read through the types of mind traps? Is that
Absolutely. Yeah. And why don't I preface it with, so part of why I think mind traps are it's so helpful to acknowledge the mind traps is it's a way that, right, it's cognitively, it's a way for us to be able to identify, categorize, and acknowledge them, right? That we can put it in a bit of a category, not so you put in a category and judge the heck out of it or anything like that, but that it's a way to kind of tame the mind for us to begin to understand and identify challenging ways that we have patterned ways of thinking, and being able to go, oh, okay, it feels more manageable when my mind can cognitively label and identify it. if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah. Name it to tame it.
Yes.
So I don't know if you want to give, first of all, cognitive distortions. I had done a little CBT work, but I didn't know, maybe I had, I don't know. Do you want to say anything about cognitive distortions? I thought that was helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in a way, what I put as mind traps is a version of cognitive distortions in cognitive behavioral therapy, right? So it's like, yep. So basically is the recognizing how we might distort our view of our lives and the world through patterned ways, right? Through very specific ways of looking at things. And as you said earlier, right, our thoughts and beliefs can become very, very, you didn't use the word rigid, but I'll use that word rigid, or like in a tunnel or constricted. And then our worldview becomes much smaller, and our ability to look at ourselves in the larger, more expansive, more compassionate way also is narrowed when we're really in those patterned ways of being. So very similar. Cognitive distortions is very similar to how I offer it up as mind traps. I just personally, I feel like mind traps, just like stress tigers, helps to kind of gain a grasp of it with maybe being a little less jargony.
Yeah. 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 So the first one is mind reader.
Yeah.
Believing this is a big one. Believing know what someone else is thinking without checking in with them.
Yep. Yep.
Common, right?
Yes. And so, I mean, I feel like we could probably do a whole episode on just mind traps, but I'll speak to that one briefly. Is right. We see that with couples and in couples therapy, right? That oftentimes most of what happens is miscommunication and hurt feelings because of something that we inferred and thought that the other person was thinking, right? Like one person might comment something and then the other one says, oh, well, they don't like me, or they think that my stomach is fat too, right? Or that was the first example that popped in my mind, right? But just that recognition, and like once you start to tease it out and actually start to have those conversations, I go, oh, I'm trying to mind read. Let me actually ask them. And when it is in a safe, trusted environment, then there's a lot of freedom and liberation that ends up happening when you actually find out, oh, the way that I thought I was reading my partner's mind was totally different than the script that I had created. Or like a lot of anxiety in workplaces and friendships, right? Is a belief of, oh my goodness, I said I was going to be there, but I flaked out because I was really anxious and didn't want to show up. Now they probably hate me. They probably won't invite me to something else. They probably think I'm the worst person in the world, right? And it's most likely that they're like, oh, it would have been great if you had come, but I still love you. Right. And just how the mind reading, oftentimes the mind reading is much more on the unhelpful thoughts direction than it being in the helpful thought direction.
No, absolutely. And, I do a lot of work. My work tends to be in families, because I do a lot with grief, or even, end of life. And it's even within families. I mean, I just think it's everywhere. We have these, this one of like, assuming the other person thought this of me, it's a really, really common, you happen to have put it first. And I do wonder I don't know if you did that on purpose or subconsciously. It's like, I do think that could be one of the most really popular ones that most of us probably have done or do. It's just, it's in there. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, it's one of the ways that our brains try to create control and feel a sense of safety.
Definitely control. Absolutely. And then, but the next one's pretty common too, catastrophizing.
Yeah. Basically creating, worst case scenarios. Something's happening. There's a change that's happened in life, and you decide, right, that my life is going hell in a handbasket, right? There's a slight shift, maybe you have a new boss, and the boss maybe doesn't seem that friendly. And then all of a sudden you've decided that they're going to fire you next week, and then you won't be able to pay rent, and then you'll be homeless, and then so really like worst case, spiraling into worst case scenarios of future possibilities that have not happened and probably won't happen.
I mean, I have noticed with a lot of clients, I'll say, let's do it. Let's catastrophize. I want to hear. And then as they say it, they'll say, I know this isn't true. Like they're, you know, but saying it out loud sometimes even helps them just to be like, no, I know it's not going to happen. And I'm like, okay, I'm, you know, but it, you know, with support, I'll say,
Yes.
let's go there. But I do think sometimes when you get it out of your brain and you either say it or write it on paper, even people have said, like, I looked at it and I was like, okay, I know, you know,
Yeah.
but you had to get it out of here in order to be like, yeah, yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
yes. I love that acknowledgement of how it can be used as a tool, right? It
yeah,
can be used as a tool of awareness as well. And the other aspect of it, right? Catastrophizing is if we're doing it alone in a silo and when it's a habit, right? So these mind traps can be a one and done, but more often it's identifying our patterned way of being, right? That it's like, if I were, you know, like if someone catastrophizes once every 2 years, okay, right? Hey, no big deal. But if it's like a daily thing or a weekly thing, then that just creates, right? Just absolute inner turmoil.
yeah, yeah. Labeling. This is a way of name calling that either discounts yourself or another person. Oh, right. You may find yourself saying, I'm such an idiot. Oh, so that's kind of a little bit what I was saying before about, you know, speaking to ourselves
Yes.
with kindness. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Or labeling somebody else like, oh, he's such an idiot, or you're right. And sort of projecting it. So it could be internal, external, but just right, creating those black and white statements of what's going on.
Mm-hmm. Perfectionism. That's
Mm-hmm.
also, yeah. Um, you know, I don't know. Do you want to talk about that for a minute? I mean, I do think this is something, yeah, I think it's important.
I agree. I think many humans have perfectionist tendencies,
Right.
and they vary on the spectrum of, how unhelpful their perfectionist ways are. But this belief that in order to be loved, or in order to be seen as like successful, or in order to be the professional that you want to be, or the mom that you want to be, or whatever it is, that there's this way that it's like, I need to do everything in great detail, absolutely 1000% perfect, no mistakes are allowed, any mistake is a failure, right? That's really, perfectionism.
Mhm.
And at the root of it is that piece around, I need, in order to be loved, in order to be accepted, in order to be seen as enough, in order for me to feel like enough, I need to be perfect. There's no gray area. I need to be perfect. And as we can, even, I'm sure everyone listening and you and I can acknowledge, is how exhausting and painful and futile that is.
Mhm.
One, because there's no such thing as perfect,
Mhm.
and we're human. We learn from, right, from our, I'll say, quote unquote, mistakes. We learn from the experiences. And so we are not a species of perfection every second of every day. So it's really just a slippery slope and a recipe for unhappiness, a recipe for anxiety, a recipe for burnout, a recipe for depression, a recipe for OCD, basically a recipe for nearly any way of distress.
Mhm. I couldn't agree more, and I just want to add that the word cognitive distortion to me also really fits here, because often the person who's striving for perfectionism, what their idea of being perfect is not anybody else. Like people are like, oh, I didn't even
Yes.
notice you didn't do that, or it's fine, or like, so it really is this distortion of like, this is perfect, and people are like, oh, I hadn't, it's a, and so it's keeping to that standard, but it's your standard that you're really just creating, that maybe someone else, yeah, maybe not. I don't know. Other people are busy. They don't know, is this real distortion? Yeah, piece. But I do agree with you, right? The exhausted and all those other parts of it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
I just want to throw in, I know, someone I'm friends with, our kids are friends, would just say, sometimes it's just good enough. I just have to say it's good enough, right? And it was a very helpful thought when you're working,
Yes.
own your own business and you have two kids, or you're like, it was good enough. And I think there was something about that was also a good role model for kids to be like, okay, we're doing what we can. Everyone's pitching in, and this is it's okay to sometimes say it's good enough, right?
Absolutely. I love that. I love that. And it's that piece around acceptance,
Mhm.
yet not resignation. As
Right.
in like, well, it's good enough. So I guess there's nothing. Oh, just kind of like that giving up piece. It's more like that. It's good enough. We did it. We showed up to the best of our ability, and we're going to show up tomorrow, and we're going to keep going. Right. So it's that kindness to yourself. And it also reminds me when I was in my early mid 20s and really suffering from depression and just oof, right? So there's a lot of self-judgment and all different things going on, lots of mind traps happening in there. And I learned to work with, similar to the good enough, it was the I'm doing my best today, right? And acknowledging with self-kindness and kind of with a little bit of humor to myself of like, and some days maybe that's not that impressive, but I'm I'm doing my personal best, right? That like maybe my personal best that day is that I get out of bed and make myself breakfast. I've done a great job, right? That it's like that best isn't perfect. Best is what do I have the capacity for today? And can that be enough?
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. I know we could probably do a whole show on these are really important. We'll just go through the discountering and filtering. I don't know as much about this one. This happens when you pay attention to negative events, and or discount positive experiences. I don't know, maybe you should talk just for a second about that one.
Yeah, it's funny. I kind of forgot about that one in there. I was like, oh yeah, and wait a minute, which one is that? But kind of that recognition that it's easier to believe, say, like any critical, feedback that you receive
Okay.
than it being like, wow, you've done a great job,
Mm.
right? It's like, oh, well, I had the help from like other colleagues and right. So there can be this way of backtracking and not accepting, a job well done. But easily enough saying, like, well, you did a great job, except there was, just want to give you a little bit of feedback. There was, this one thing and, this, whatever it is. And then kind of perseverating on that, right? So filtering out and being with like the one piece that makes you less than perfect, while also discounting all of the other amazing ways that you show up in the world.
Okay, good. Yes, yeah. It reminds me, I borrowed this from someone said, if you look for the darkness, you only see darkness, right?
Mm-hmm.
Similar, right? It's like, okay, there was some light in there too. There was light. Okay, maybe how, okay. Okay, oh, all or nothing. I think so that's kind of what I was talking about when I try not to use the negative positive. It goes to this all or nothing. So I really try to
Yes.
role model. That's why I try not to use those words, negative, positive, good, bad, all or nothing. I feel like it's that same category, which we know doesn't support people, right?
No. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And like another word related to that, right? Like black and white thinking, right? And I love being able to use this one with clients where they start to recognize within themselves, oh yeah, I am doing that all or nothing thinking again, right? Like maybe they've say made I'll use the word progress, right? Quite a bit of progress where like they're feeling more expansive, things are feeling more possible. There's less fixations on like what's not working and a willingness to see what's, moving forward. And then as we all do, we ebb and flow in our stress responses to life. And then, they might show up the next week and be like, everything's wrong, ... right? And really go into this place. And then I might ask them some version of, do you feel like you're in an all or nothing black and white thinking place? And then it's kind of that realization of, oh yeah, I am.
Mm-hmm.
And then if we can begin to open up to that and create more of a continuum than a black and white thinking, how does that feel? Does that feel more expansive? Does it feel more possible? Last week, when you showed up and felt much less stressed and more possible, were you in a black and white thinking space? And the answer is, well, yeah, no, I wasn't. Right. So just that's another, to me, example where these mind traps can be so helpful. It's an awareness tool of, oh yeah, wow, part of what is having me, dip in this, being in this valley and dipped in there and steeped in there, an aspect of it is the all or nothing thinking. So I feel trapped at the bottom of the valley.
Yeah, I love that. You said it in such a great way. I will just add, I will sometimes say to clients, in Buddhism, we have this, there's this idea of the middle path. So sometimes say, instead of being like, black and white or all, can we look at the middle path? What would the middle path look like or something?
Absolutely.
So
Love
here's
that.
the last one, and I am trying to be mindful of the time. So let's do the last one and then we'll talk.
Yes.
Now, emotional reasoning. Maybe, let's see, this happens when you base your judgments, decisions, and conclusions exclusively on your feelings, especially when you're stressed. Can you talk about this one a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So as we know, emotions are vitally important, and we never would suggest as therapists to suppress the emotion, invalidate the emotion, or anything like that, right? And it's also really important for us to be able to sit with the emotion and be with it and let it move through us without buying into every thought that we're having that's feeding into that emotion.
Okay.
Right? Because recognizing, as we know, our thoughts and our emotions can feed each other, right? Like a helpful thought, such as, let's see, what would be a helpful thought? Oh, I have an interview today and it's going to go great. Right? You have a certain feeling inside of you, right? There's a lightness, there's a brightness, there's a possibility. I have an interview today and it's probably going to suck and I probably won't get it because I haven't gotten a job from the 20 other interviews I've been on. So why would I get this one? Right? Immediately, right? That deflated feeling. And so when we're in an emotional state, and particularly in, say, I'll say an emotional state that we as humans don't like because it has that we naturally don't want discomfort. So if we're feeling like maybe sadness, I'll use sadness as an example. And then your thoughts start to flood in of all the reasons that life is sad, right? All the failed relationships or whatever it is, kind of those spirally ways. And then we can cling on to the thoughts and go, yeah, those thoughts are truth. Those thoughts are facts, right? So it's more like, okay, when we're having the emotion, can we let the thoughts be there without attaching to them is one aspect of it. And then allowing the emotion to move through us as it naturally eventually will, especially if we don't attach our thoughts so strongly. And then the other piece of it is the idea of reacting in the moment versus, say, responding at a later point in time. An idea of like an email came into my mind. You get a distressing email and immediately respond back with, this is not fair, this is messed up, da da da. And then realizing later, oh, maybe I could have let myself be with the emotion and then calm down and then reevaluate, right? And it speaks to also, let's see, I'm trying to remember if it's within DBT, I believe. I could be wrong about which modality, but basically the idea that we have the rational mind that is very right. Yeah. Neck up. We have the emotional mind that is just the emotions. And then the Venn diagram that comes together. And I see you nodding, so you get where I'm going with this, right? The wise mind right in the middle. Right. And so it's important to have that balanced. It's not the fully rational, with devoid of any emotion. That can be a slippery slope and that can create unhelpful outcomes. And if you're only in the emotional mind, that also can create unhelpful outcomes. But when we can bring them together at a place of, wow, this is where my heart is speaking from through the rationale, through the heart, then that's that wise mind space that allows us to be more truly aligned with who we are and therefore be able to express ourselves in a way that does feel the most honest in the moment.
No, I love that. And what I think it's so true, because a lot of this is, I do use this, but you're really giving words to, I just think that this is so, so helpful. And I wanted to say what's really funny is I had written Freud, ego, decision maker. But you said it in a beautiful way, the wise mind, because what I usually say to people is there's an empowering place in there. And I'm not necessarily the biggest Freud, he said a lot of things, whatever. But this is one thing where he said, the ego can make the decision or make choices, right? But I like wise mind. That's really nice, right? But it's like, you're right. And I always talk about the rational and the emotional brain, but where is this place? And I actually just did a podcast for someone else. I was the guest. I talked about that this comes from, there's this empowering piece, whether it's, you call it the ego or this wise mind. And so many of my clients find that more empowering because I can choose. It becomes, yeah.
Oof, oof, oof. So yes, so important to recognize that piece. And maybe I know we're both conscious of time. Maybe ending this particular section of our series on that piece of recognizing that we always have choice, even in the most dire situations, and maybe a case, right? If you're in a coerced situation, abusive, choice can be a lot harder, right? But more often than not, the coercion is our inner coercion that is, right, keeping us protected from change by continuing to believe these old unhelpful thoughts, but that we actually have the power of choice to think differently. Not suggesting that it's easy, not being flippant about it, like, oh, just like think differently and stop being depressed, right? No, it's not that at all. But it's that starting to that recognition of that empowered place of, oh, I have the power of choice. I can choose differently. I can begin to choose differently today.
Yeah, today. Right. I love that. Right. As you were saying, I'm being the best I can for today, or I'm making this choice for today.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time, your wisdom. This is amazing. We only got to page 79. In the book, and there's okay, we're getting there. Let's see how many, I'm just looking how many pages there are. 157. It's me, but it's really great. There's just there's so much great information, and I was going to say, like, nuggets of helpfulness, I think, in here. So I'm hoping maybe we'll do a part 3. But I do want to say, like, I just really appreciate your time, and I think this is great. This book, Burn Bright, it's just, I really think it touches on so many really helpful things for so many clients and just for so many people,
Yeah, I appreciate all of that. Thank you. I appreciate your time. I would be happy to do another one and see how far we get. And yes, I do have it specifically right for people experiencing burnout, but I also have, people that have read it that were like more curious about stress management, and they really realized something, you know, then and spoke of it is, oh, this is actually like a mental health, mental wellness guide. It could be for burnout, right? But people experiencing anxiety, depression, right? It's really a way of learning to holistically connect to your own inner wisdom by acknowledging your thoughts, by acknowledging your emotions, by being with your body and using different tools to help really create that self-kindness, self-compassion, holistic way of choosing the life that you want to live.
Absolutely. And just before we wrap up, you know, there's a number of things in it also that I do think, I mean, I work with many clients, but often people who are grieving or have lost someone. There's just other helpful pieces in here. As you know, I've recommended this to many of my clients. But you're right, it is just about our thoughts and you know, working with them. And what did you say? You said mental wellness guide. Is that what you said?
Probably. That sounds about right.
I think it's true. I think that that is really true. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank
This
you,
was
Carolyn.
wonderful. I really, really appreciate it. So everybody stay tuned. We will do another episode because there's so much to learn from Charlene.
Thank you, Carolyn. Thank you, everyone, for listening.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.